I dig love. I dig love. I dig love.
You listened to the fascinating story of Asha Puthli, who was with me here at Six Music a couple of weeks ago now, talking about the jazz side of things, listening to modern jazz quartet, Lonely Woman, written by Ornette Coleman, and more music coming from Asha, her disco years.
You said you loved me, then you let me in. The Lord didn't give it to me. I can see it in your eyes. Lies, lies, lies.
How are your ears, Asha?
What's that?
How are your ears? How do you feel?
My ears?
Yeah, are you good? Are they? I mean, just generally, all this music business, have you managed to maintain good hearing?
Oh, yeah. It's my brain I'm worried about. Not my ears and my back.
So, Asha Puthli, it's not every day that I bump into you and that we have a chance to meet up. I can't believe this is happening, actually. You were in my imagination. I listened to your music, but I couldn't imagine that you actually existed somehow. I thought you lived in some sort of desert island or some beautiful place in tropical somewhere. So you're in London.
Why do people think I'm a myth? I'm still trying to figure out I'm live flesh and blood. And
You are.
no wonder no one asks me to come and give a concert. They're probably thinking the same thing you do. Who knows?
Well, you seem in absolutely fantastic form and excited about music and everything. Tell us a little bit about your history. Take us back to how you got discovered and your early roots and where you come from and all that stuff.
All right, I'll try and be as brief as possible. I don't want to eat up all the time. And, I talk too much.
Don't worry, we're good.
Years ago, I used to say talking is my drug and singing is my sex. It was used as a title for a documentary. How far back do you want to go?
Well, just the beginning. I think it's
In
really
the embryo?
a fascinating story. Well, no, maybe a little bit after that.
Okay. So as a child, I used to sing a lot, hang out of the window literally and sing. And I come from a very traditional family. And so they didn't want me to have any of these crazy ideas of getting into show business or singing or blah, blah, blah. And the only thing I could do was study for just knowledge. Indian classical. It's called Jaipur Gharana, from Jaipur, North Indian music, and classical and opera. So that's what happened. And then
born in Bombay?
Yeah, born and raised in Bombay, yeah.
And what kind of family, tell us about your family.
My family, very traditional.
Yeah.
My sister has the most mellifluous, beautiful voice, and she sings much better than I do, I think. But she sings only Indian music. And she sings mostly classical, semi-classical, what's known as ghazals, tumris, unbelievable voice. But she was a great inspiration to me. And I used to hear her sing, and that's what prompted me. I learned from the same guru. But I belong to the 60s, my generation in Bombay listened mainly to Voice of America for jazz and to Radio Ceylon, which is now Sri Lanka. In those days it was Ceylon, for pop music. And Radio Ceylon played mostly Cliff Richard, and Pat Boone, Elvis Presley. Well, the jazz stuff was Ella Fitzgerald, Sarah Vaughan. The people that influenced me, I'm only mentioning the names. Little did I realize, and the DJ for that was Willis Conover, who's passed away. He was like the high priest of jazz, as you are in your field here. And he never did I dream that within a year and a half of my going to the States, I would not only be introduced by Willis Conover in a big festival, written about in his book, and that he would one day play the record I sang on a year and a half after going to America. And that record was Ornette Coleman's Science Fiction.
I've waited all my life for you.
Ornette Coleman.
Ornette.
You said that there was a great story there.
Yeah, how did I see him? I saw him only. I never met him. So, as I told you, to get out of this, I wanted to get out of India. How am I going to do it? For my 18th birthday, my father gave me an old English car. And my neighbor was a stewardess for British Airways, which was then called BOAC. And she said, Asha, I have to go and pick up my check. Will you drive me there because you have a car? I said, sure, because we lived in the suburbs. So I took her just to pick her check, looking dreadful like I'm today. I mean, I haven't dressed or anything, you know. And I mean, I've got clothes on, but I haven't dressed. So we go. And the minute I walk in, the general manager comes running up to me and says, why don't girls like you come for these interviews? We've been here 3 days. All we want is 2 Indian girls to fly on British Airways so that, you know, we need some stewardesses who speak Hindi, Indian languages, and English. And you speak English beautifully. So why can't we have girls like you? I said, well, for one, my parents wouldn't allow me. They've got an arranged marriage all set up for me, you know. But he knew how to get to me. He had the magic words. And they were, I can get you a passport in 2 weeks. And in immediately after that, we're going to send you to London for 2 months to be trained as a stewardess. Wouldn't you want? I said, oh my God, this is too good to be true, you know. So I said, okay. And that's it.
Wow.
And I got it without really even trying.
So you were out of the norm in a way. I mean, you were getting out of town. You weren't going to do your arranged marriage. You were singing in nightclubs, underaged or whatever, with your back to the audience and going off and playing and doing the rock and roll thing, hanging out with Andy Warhol. And
no, that was much later.
That was later.
Oh, much later, yes.
Can we talk about a few...
Oh, how I saw Ornette. I'm coming to that,
we'll
darling.
get there.
I'm sorry I had to give you this whole long story because otherwise it doesn't make sense. How did I land up on the footsteps of Ronnie Scott's? So now, here I am, training to be a stewardess. And they used to only give us a small per diem, you know, for food or whatever it was. Ronnie Scott's used to have, I haven't been there in ages, but I don't know if they had the speakers outside. So I sat outside, listening to the music. I had no idea who was inside playing, but I'm listening to only to educate myself, to hear what's happening at Ronnie Scott's. And he came out. He was so wonderful. He said, what are you doing here sitting? Come in. You can sit. Then I explained. I said, I'm so sorry. I'm going to need this much money, and that's for my cab. After I only come to hear this, so I'm sitting outside. And then he said, no, come in. You don't have to buy any drinks, nothing. Just come, sit. And I sat at the back and I saw Ornette for the first time. We never met. And he was with Charlie Moffat. I still remember because it was a shock to me. This was not the jazz I heard on Voice of America. So there was Charlie Moffat, and he was like a rat holding something in his mouth, going, you know. And David Isanon, who looked like a swan, going, he was playing the bass, and Ornette. But who knew that I was going to be thrown into this orbit with him, you know?
What a story.
I worked with Ornette, as I mentioned. The first thing was John Hammond. And how he met me, and that's why I say God really does guide me. Not me, but he's guiding the forces to open the doors for me. The only name I knew was John Hammond Sr. because he discovered all the greats, as you know, Billie Holiday, Bessie Smith, Bob Dylan, and later on, Bruce Springsteen. And myself, in that order, you know. And I had no idea how to get hold of him. I got a number of CBS, and I kept calling and saying, I'd like to meet with Mr. Hammond, and I have a tape for him to hear. And this was that fusion tape. And the secretary always said, you can send the tape. And I'm sure she's got a pile of tapes under her table, you know, just shoving it there. She never gave it to him. And then 6 months later, I got a call from a writer. He's a blind writer called Ved Mehta, who's very well known. And he'd written a book called Portrait of India in 1960s, late 60s. And he was also one of the senior writers at New Yorker. So it had come in the New Yorker. And as he walked into the Century Club, which was a men-only club in those days, this was pre-72 when it changed, or 75. And he walked in, and John Hammond happened to be reading the chapter on me, or I'd just finished reading it. And he said, Mr. Mehta, we've never met. I'd love to meet this young girl. Did she finally make it to the States? John Hammond said, I want to meet this girl. Has she come? So in that book, it writes about my struggle and how I'm going to get out, my plans to get out. And he said, yes. In fact, she arrived 6 months ago. She got a scholarship from Martha Graham. And he said, please tell her to call me. And for 6 months, I'd been trying to reach him. So when I walked in, there was the famous Elizabeth, who I'd sent only 20 tapes to by now. So I went, and I met him. And, oh, yes, he put me together with Ornette Coleman. He just called me. He said, go to Studio B, CBS. Don't tell them who sent you. He's been looking for a singer. He's tried. It won't be nice for me to tell you who he tried, but he tried some very good singers.
Go on.
Excellent people I admire tremendously.
Like who?
Nancy Wilson. And I forget the other name now. And it hadn't worked. It hadn't gelled for some reason. So he said, Ornette's trying someone. Go, don't say anything. And if he says he's going to try you, go ahead, do whatever you can. Unknown to me, in the engineering room behind the glass door, which I couldn't see, was the writer from Downbeat and the writer from Rolling Stone, Robert Palmer. He was a historian, music historian. So I went in and he said, will you read the music or should I play it for you? I said, just play it for me. So he played it once. I said, just play it one more time so I get the melody right. I don't want to make a fool of myself. And he played it again. And then we recorded it, and that's what you hear.
Wow. Which song was that? Because you did two songs on the album.
2 songs. I've Waited All My Life and What Reason Could I Give?
So that was the first record that you sang on outside of India?
No, outside of India, I sang, my first record was an EP in Singapore. It's a very long story, honey.
Well, we are absolute record nerds here, so we need to know would these records exist for starters, and we're fascinated by this sort of stuff.
Yeah, it was in the 60s. It was extremely difficult to get out of India after independence of India, so most of us didn't have passports. You just didn't get a passport unless someone sponsored you, or if you were going for higher studies. And I used to beg with my dad, please let me go, please let me go. And I was trying to get into one of the universities, and I applied to Northwest, to Syracuse, to Juilliard, to Berkeley, every university there, saying, can I have a scholarship to synthesize Indian classical with jazz? Because I see a similarity. But they didn't have any scholarships in place at the time. Berkeley was the first one to even start a jazz department, but they didn't understand what I was trying to say. So I never did get that scholarship.
So you just needed to, for you as a young girl, you wanted to get out of Bombay. You wanted to see the bright lights of America and the music that was going on.
And I wanted to, because I felt it was the youngest culture.
Yeah. I
came from the oldest culture. I mean, we all say 6,000 years of culture, and America was the youngest new, country in a way. So I said, well, I'd like to synthesize jazz, which is an indigenous form, so to speak, or semi-classical music of America, with Indian classical in form.
So you were way ahead of your time.
That was in the 60s.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so who would have been your inspirations in terms of those kind of concepts of fusing music together?
I would say MJQ, for some odd reason. The third stream concept, yeah.